Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? What is it? The last time I made a video was in January? Yeah, it was January. Wow, that was a really long time ago. I did not expect to have like 3 to 4 month breaks in between all the different video stuff. I just have a lot of other things going on at the moment. Thankfully, I got a little bit of breathing room today to work on a video, so this is what we're doing today. In the event of everything that is going on in the moment, it's really hard to talk about movies because, well, there's no new film releases and not much new to talk about. Going forward, for any movie I make a video about, it has to be something I'm really passionate about, or something I would personally really enjoy, or something that I feel very passionate about and want to talk about. My best videos, the ones I have made, are the ones and stuff I'm very passionate about. I was passionately angry at that Lion King movie. I was passionate and really excited for The Rise of Skywalker, regardless how that movie turned out to be. I was really passionate about Ghostbusters because, I don't know if you haven't noticed already, I'm kind of obsessed with it. But thankfully, I think I found a movie that I'm passionate about and I've really wanted to talk about, even if I had to watch two moderate okay movies. They're 6 out of 10 maybe. Found something a little bit more interesting to talk about, and it's actually a good movie for once. So for once, I don't have to rant about CGI or Disney or any of those things. I get to talk about a sequel to a movie that came out in 1980. This is gonna be fun. I'm going to be completely upfront honest when I say that I am not the biggest horror movie guy in the world. There are 1 or 2 that come out every year that I think are pretty good, but for the most part, don't really get sucked into them. I don't know what it is about them, but I often find myself just watching the same movie over and over again with the same stereotypical characters / villain, tropes, jump scares, whatever. I'm just not really all that interested in that kind of stuff, nor do I ever find it particularly all that scary. Quite honestly, I get scared and spooked by, say, horror games or something because you're interacting with it, where films, you're just watching a screen. There has to be something exceptional or something outside of the horror genre that the movie brings to the table to make it interesting and worthwhile for me. That all being said, there are some exceptions to them. 2 in particular that I can think of on the top of my head, I would consider to be 2 of my favorite movies of all time. Ridley Scott's original Alien and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The Shining I would genuinely consider to be the greatest horror film ever made. Its direction, fantastic performances, ambiguity, and iconic visuals and scares make it the greatest horror film ever made. And even still to this very day does give me creepy vibes and does genuinely freak me out in a couple of moments. And that's for a film that came out in 1980. The movie is 40 years old now and it still holds up as an incredible horror movie and still works to this very day. It's also one of those movies that you can't really follow up on without it being a bit of a mess. On paper, it sounds like a Hollywood cash grab move to capitalize on the cult status of the original movie and make a quick buck. However, the Doctor Sleep has a few things going for it in that regard to make sure it doesn't feel like a cash grab sequel. For one, Stephen King actually wrote a sequel book that actually works as its own standalone story, detached from the original Shining. And secondly, the choice of the film's director is Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan, in my opinion, is the most underrated director working today. This guy pumps out a horror miniseries or film or some piece of media every single year, and all of them are consistently fantastic. He's an excellent horror director who knows how to use jump scares minimally, builds great suspense, and really focuses on having great characters and story to hold the film together, as opposed to making the characters weak and generic and focusing so much on the scares and visuals. So if there was any filmmaker I would trust when handling a sequel to one of the greatest horror films ever made, it would be him. That being said, this was never going to be an easy task for him. Making a sequel to The Shining film is one thing, but having to make a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining while also pleasing Stephen King is a whole other difficult task in and of itself. King has been very vocal since the film's release that he absolutely loathes it and hates it due to many of the changes that Stanley Kubrick made to his original narrative. So, how does Mike Flanagan's film actually pan out in the grand scheme of things? How did it come together? Really, really good, but just short of something transcendent or fantastic. Let me explain. The first thing I should know about the movie is its fantastic performances from the cast. Uma McGregor does a fantastic job as Danny Torrance. Rebecca Ferguson also does a fantastic job in the movie, and the little clan of villains that she also has with them also do a fantastic job with their roles. The little girl in the film as well is also fantastic, and she does a really great job with her role, and was honestly like maybe the most impressive child performance in any Mike Flanagan film, which is really saying something. As per usual, Mike Flanagan's direction is absolutely fantastic. Mike Flanagan's visual style that he has in all of his other films meshes perfectly with Kubrick's to create its own unique visual aesthetic that feels faithful to the original while also does its own thing. There are plenty of trippy and creative sequences in the film that create really inventive scares. The story's narrative, it works absolutely as its own standalone feature. You could totally watch this film without having seen the original Shining and still get the basic plot and gist of what is going on in the narrative. Obviously, you'll get more out of the story if you've seen the original film, but the movie works as its own standalone film, hence probably why the title Dr. Sleep was used as opposed to something like The Shining bracket. I don't know, I don't come up with sequel titles, I'm not a Hollywood screenwriter. One small aspect of the film that caught me completely by surprise is how they incorporate scenes that were set after the events of the first movie. Instead of digitally recreating the actors in horrifying CGI faces, the film opts to just recast the original characters with different actors. And while I don't think they're quite as good as those original actors, the actors they chose in this film are great and still capture the spirit of those original characters. They are a little bit goofy in a few sequences. For example, Henry Thomas plays Jack Torrance, Jack Nicholson's character in the original, and the film wisely chooses to only show him in wide shots as to not how ridiculous the makeup is, but you can't help but feel in a few sequences that it looks a bit silly and a bit over the top. Not to say that it's necessarily the film's fault. I'd rather they have done this as opposed to recreate a horrifying CGI Jack Nicholson, but it was a lose-lose situation for the filmmakers, and I think they made the best of a bad situation. Not to mention, it doesn't take you out of the movie, it's just a minor distraction. It's not like, say, the CGI Terminators in like the Terminator franchise, where the CGI Arnold Schwarzenegger completely takes you out of the movie and you're focusing more on the CG rather than what's happening in the scene. For the first 2/3 of the film, I was really engrossed and invested in what was going on, and I wanted to see how it was going to end. And I got excited when they teased the third act finale being set in the Overlook Hotel, which, surprisingly enough, is kind of where my issues kind of start with this movie. I'm not going to spoil any plot stuff, but if you want to jump around, there's a time code on screen. Jump to that point of the video if you don't want spoilers, because a lot of my issues with this movie start and kind of end with the third act. So there's your warning. 3, 2, 1. The third act of the movie takes place in the Overlook Hotel, and throughout the sequence you see many references and visuals from the original Shining, almost to the movie's fault. It doesn't completely ruin the film, in my opinion. I've seen a lot of people complain that the third act destroys the movie, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's just disappointing that the film went this direction. Mike Flanagan, instead of wanting to use the visuals and the iconography of the films in a clever and unique way that fits within the own narrative, just grinds the whole movie to a halt so we can look at the original Shining films. Look, we recreated the scene in the bathroom. Look, we recreated the elevator shot. Look, we recreated these sets and the aesthetic of the original film, which, don't get me wrong, they did a really great job of recreating the original set and hotel, but that's really it. The whole sequence just seems to show off how well they were able to recreate it, and I think Mike Flanagan got too carried away with just referencing the original. Entire segments of this third act could be completely trimmed or removed and you wouldn't miss a thing. The whole film just feels like a tourist attraction through the original Shining as opposed to a sequel to the film. There is one exception to all this, to a scene where Uma McGregor sits down at the bar, and without giving anything away, they recreate Jack Torrance meeting Lloyd scene from the original, and it's really clever and inventive and fits within the narrative of the film, and is maybe the best scene in the whole movie. It does a really great job of exploring Danny's character and his relationship to Jack. I just wish that this third act of the film had more moments like this. Most of the moments in this third act just feel like references to the original for the sake of references. You can tell Mike Flanagan is really showing off his love for the original Shining, but almost too much. It feels like the filmmaker is completely taking over the film, shoehorning in references, as opposed to letting the film play out on its own. don't get me wrong, this doesn't completely destroy the movie, and the movie does end on a satisfying note for all the different character arcs and everything that was established. The execution of it, however, just is a bit hit and miss. The whole film was doing such a great job being its own standalone film that fit within Kubrick's original film, and it's disappointing to see that they didn't go all the way with that. Now, despite the negatives about the third act I might have mentioned, this is still a fantastic movie for the most part. It has really great direction, the acting is solid, the music is really good by the Newton brothers, Mike Flanagan's frequent collaborators, and is a faithful sequel to both the original Shining and Stephen King's book. It's a really great movie that comes short of just being fantastic. As they shifted around a few elements in the third act, I think it could have been something amazing. But at the end of the day, it's still a really good movie, and I would highly recommend it, both as its own standalone movie, as a sequel to The Shining, as a Stephen King adaptation, or just as a standalone movie. With all that being said, I'm going to give this movie 8 out of 10. I don't know how else to end this video.
And a rendezvous.